The pastor hadn't even finished the opening prayer when my mother leaned toward me and whispered, "After this, we need to talk about the estate." We were sitting in the front pew of a small stone church in Cedar Falls, Iowa. Gray light filtered through stained glass windows, washing the room in muted blues and greens. Outside, late October wind rattled the bare branches, a sound like bones clicking together. It was the 5th anniversary of my grandmother Ruth's death. This was supposed to be a memorial service. That was the lie. The truth sat heavy in my stomach as I nodded once and kept my eyes forward. "My name is Meredith Hale. I'm 33 years old. I work as a regional operations manager for a private nursing home group across the Midwest. I spend my days making sure elderly people are safe, medicated correctly, and protected from lawsuits their families never see coming, which is ironic considering my own family." To anyone watching us that morning, we looked respectful. United, a grieving family honoring a matriarch. My mother Eleanor sat stiffly beside me in her tailored black coat, lips pressed thin. On her other side was my older brother Scott, hands folded, eyes darting around the church like he was waiting for someone to accuse him of something. Behind us sat my younger sister Paige, dabbing theatrically at dry eyes. And then there was me, the daughter who came home, the one who never settled down, the one who worked too much, the one who, according to family lore, had always been difficult. The pastor spoke about Ruth's kindness, her generosity, her belief in family. I bit the inside of my cheek. My grandmother had been kind, yes, but she had also been observant, quietly skeptical. She saw things long before I did. 5 years ago at her funeral, she had squeezed my hand and whispered, "Don't let them turn you into the help." I hadn't understood her then. I did now. When the service ended, people hugged and murmured condolences. My mother didn't cry. She didn't hug anyone. She went straight into command mode. "Lunch is at the house," she announced. "We'll discuss arrangements after." Arrangements. Scott exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for an hour. Paige straightened her coat and checked her reflection in her phone camera. I followed them out into the cold. The house smelled like lemon cleaner and old furniture. My grandmother's house. The one my parents still lived in because it didn't make sense to move. I had helped with that logic, paid for repairs, handled insurance renewals, coordinated contractors after a hailstorm. No one ever mentioned that part. We sat around the dining table, the same one where I had done homework as a teenager, while my mother critiqued my posture and my brother complained about chores. My mother folded her hands. "Now," she said, "we need to talk about responsibility." There it was. She looked directly at me. "Meredith," she continued, "you've been very involved in family matters. Too involved." Paige nodded. Scott stared at the table. "I'm not sure what you mean," I said evenly. My mother sighed, already irritated. "You're always stepping in. Handling paperwork, making decisions. It creates confusion." Confusion? I thought about the medical forms I'd filled out when my grandmother's health declined, the insurance appeals I'd filed, the care schedules I'd coordinated while my brother was finding himself and my sister was overwhelmed. "I was asked to help," I said. "That's not the point," Paige cut in. "You make us feel incapable." I turned to her slowly. "By doing what you asked me to do," she flushed. "You always twist things." My mother raised a hand. "Enough. The issue is this. You rely too much on being needed." Scott snorted softly. "She needs to be the hero." The room tilted slightly. Needed. Hero. They were rewriting the story in real time. My mother continued, "We think it would be healthier if you stepped back. Let us manage things ourselves." Something cold settled behind my ribs. "You want me to step back," I said. "From what exactly?" "The estate," she said. "The medical paperwork, the accounts, everything." Scott finally looked up. "You don't even live here anymore." There it was. I smiled faintly. "You're right, I don't." What I didn't say was that I paid the property taxes, that I handled the long-term care insurance, that I was listed as emergency contact on more documents than I could count. But I didn't say it. Not yet. My mother leaned forward. "We don't want you relying on us to feel important." The words landed wrong, backwards, upside down. But they said them with confidence. That's when I realized something crucial. They believed this, or at least they needed to. Because if I wasn't the dependent one, then they were. And that truth scared them more than losing me ever could. I drove back to my hotel in silence. The sky was low and gray, the kind of Midwest afternoon that presses down on you. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat. "Paige, you didn't have to look so offended. Mom was being honest." "Honest?" I didn't reply. At the hotel, I kicked off my shoes, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at the wall until the noise in my head settled into something manageable. Then I opened my laptop, not out of anger, out of habit. I navigated to a folder labeled Family, Health, and Legal. Years of files sat neatly organized inside, PDFs, emails, signed forms. I started with one document, medical power of attorney, executed 6 years earlier. My grandmother had insisted on it after my grandfather's stroke. She had named me as primary agent. Not my mother, not my brother, me. At the time, my mother had laughed it off. Temporary, she'd said. Just in case. Temporary had turned into permanent. I scrolled. The document didn't just cover my grandmother. It extended to Eleanor Hale contingent upon incapacity, a clause I had forgotten about, or maybe tried not to think about. I swallowed. Next file. Estate liability disclosures. When my grandmother entered assisted living briefly, there had been an incident. A fall, a misfiled report, potential exposure. I had handled it. Quietly. Settled it before it became a lawsuit. My parents never knew how close it had been. Another file. Deferred maintenance notices on the house, permits, insurance riders. I was listed everywhere, not as owner, as responsible party. My phone rang. Mom. I let it ring. Then Scott. Then Paige. I turned the phone face down and kept reading. That was when I found it. A scanned document from 3 years ago, buried, forgotten. A signed affidavit. My parents' signatures were right there. They had authorized me to act on their behalf in matters related to elder care, estate compliance, and liability mitigation. Broad language. Dangerously broad. I leaned back slowly. They had told me to step back. Fine, but stepping back didn't erase paper, and paper has consequences. I closed the laptop and stared at the ceiling. For the first time since the lunch, my chest felt light, not relieved. Clear. They thought I needed them. They had no idea how much they had already handed me. Outside, the wind howled. And somewhere between Cedar Falls and the life I was leaving behind, something irreversible had begun. The first letter arrived before I even checked out of the hotel. It was slipped under my door sometime after midnight, folded, once my name written in my mother's tight, deliberate handwriting. No envelope, no stamp, just Meredith, centered, confident, like she still owned the space around it. I stared at it for a long moment before picking it up. This wasn't accidental. My mother never did anything accidentally. I sat on the edge of the bed and unfolded the paper slowly. Meredith, we didn't want to embarrass you yesterday, but you forced our hand. Your behavior has become intrusive and controlling, and it's time we set clear boundaries. I exhaled through my nose. Boundaries. Her favorite word when she wanted obedience dressed up as morality. You have always needed to feel indispensable. Your grandmother enabled this, and now that she's gone, it's unhealthy for you to cling to authority that was never meant to be permanent. Authority. I kept reading. We've spoken to our attorney. For everyone's protection, we are formally requesting that you relinquish any roles you've assumed regarding medical, financial, or estate matters. This will help you move forward with your own life. There it was. Not concern. Not love. Eviction. Not from the house, from relevance. I folded the letter neatly and placed it back on the nightstand. My hands were steady. My heart rate was normal. The reaction I'd expected never came. Instead, a single thought settled into place, cold and precise. They think paper disappears when you stop believing in it. I checked out of the hotel and drove toward the highway just as the sun began to rise. The farmland stretched wide and empty on either side, frost clinging to the edges of cornfields. It was beautiful in a lonely, honest way. My phone rang. I didn't look. By the time I crossed into Minnesota, I had 6 missed calls and 4 texts. I ignored all of them. I needed quiet to think. When I got home that afternoon, I dropped my bag by the door and went straight to my desk. I didn't change clothes. I didn't make tea. I opened my laptop. I started with the affidavit, the one I had found buried in the folder, signed by both my parents, witnessed, notarized. They had authorized me to act broadly on their behalf in matters of elder care and estate compliance after my grandmother's fall scare. At the time, they had been grateful, overwhelmed, relieved someone else knew what to do. They had never revoked it. I pulled up state statutes, cross-referenced authority duration, checked revocation requirements. It wasn't as simple as sending a letter. They would need to file a formal revocation. And until then, I was still legally empowered. More than that, the affidavit created obligation. Duty of care. If I stepped back without ensuring continuity and something went wrong, liability could follow. Not mine. Theirs. I leaned back and closed my eyes. This wasn't a weapon. It was a trap they had built themselves and forgotten. That evening I called my attorney, Rachel. She listened without interrupting as I laid everything out. The service, the lunch, the letter, the affidavit. When I finished, there was a pause. They've made a mistake, she said finally. Yes, I agreed. Several. They think authority is emotional, she continued, but it's procedural, and they handed it to you willingly. What happens if they try to force me out? I asked. Rachel inhaled slowly. If they file without proper revocation and something happens medically or financially, they expose themselves to significant risk. I smiled faintly. They don't know that. No, she said. And based on what you've described, they won't ask. After we hung up, I sat alone in my apartment, the lights dim, the city humming outside. For the first time, I understood something about my grandmother. She hadn't chosen me because I was kind. She had chosen me because I was careful. And now the people who had always dismissed that trait were about to learn what it meant. The hospital called 2 days later. Not my parents. Not my sister. Me. I was in a meeting at work when my phone vibrated silently on the table. I glanced down, saw the caller ID, and felt something click into place. Cedar Falls Medical Center. I excused myself and stepped into the hallway. "This is Meredith Hale," I said. "Ms. Hale," the nurse replied, her voice brisk but polite. "Your mother, Eleanor Hale, was admitted early this morning. Chest pain. She's stable, but we needed to confirm decision authority." Decision authority. I closed my eyes. "Yes," I said. "I'm listed as medical power of attorney." "That's what we have," the nurse confirmed. "Your father is here, but he wasn't able to answer some of the intake questions." Of course he wasn't. "I'll be there tomorrow morning," I said. "In the meantime, proceed with standard protocol." When I hung up, my hands trembled slightly. Not fear. Recognition. They had told me to step back. They had sent letters. They had drawn lines. And yet when reality arrived, it came straight to me. My phone lit up seconds later. "Scott," I answered. "She's in the hospital," he said, panic barely contained. "They're asking questions about meds, about history. Why didn't you tell us you were still listed?" I chose my words carefully. "You never asked me to revoke it," I said. "You asked me to step back." "This isn't the time to be technical," he snapped. "This is exactly the time," I replied. Paige took the phone. "You need to come now," she said. "Mom is scared." I stared out the window at the gray sky. "I'll be there in the morning," I said again. When I arrived at the hospital the next day, my parents looked smaller than I remembered. My mother lay in bed, pale, furious eyes sharp with accusation the moment she saw me. "You had no right," she hissed. "We told you to step away." "You didn't revoke anything," I said calmly. "So I'm still responsible." My father looked between us, lost. "This is ridiculous," my mother said. "I'm fine. This was nothing." The doctor entered before I could respond. He greeted me directly. "Ms. Hale," he said, "we need to discuss follow-up care. There are risk factors we can't ignore." My mother's face darkened. "I can speak for myself," she snapped. The doctor nodded politely. "Of course. But legally, I'm required to consult her." He gestured to me. The room went silent. Paige stared at the floor. Scott clenched his jaw. My mother said nothing. For the first time in her life, control had slipped out of her hands in front of witnesses. After the doctor left, she turned on me. "You did this on purpose," she said. "No," I replied. "You did." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I simply stood there, steady, undeniable. And in that sterile hospital room surrounded by beeping monitors and paperwork, no one else understood. The balance shifted. They had tried to erase me. Instead, they had proven why I was there in the first place. And this time, the consequences were only beginning. The discharge papers took longer than the hospital stay. My mother was declared stable by late afternoon, but nothing moved until every box was checked, every signature signed, every follow-up scheduled. Nurses came and went. Clipboards appeared and vanished. My father paced. Scott argued with a billing clerk. Paige cried quietly into her phone. And every time a question mattered, every time a decision carried weight, they turned to me. Not because they wanted to, because the system required it. I stood at the foot of the bed while the cardiologist explained medication changes. I asked about interactions, long-term monitoring, risk escalation. He answered me directly using language meant for someone who understood responsibility. My mother watched, furious and silent. When the doctor left, she rounded on me. "You're enjoying this," she said. I looked at her carefully. "No, I'm managing it." "You always need control," she snapped. "That's not control," I said. "That's continuity." She scoffed. "You think you're so important." "I think someone has to be," I replied. That shut her up. By the time we reached the parking lot, the temperature had dropped. Wind cut through our coats. My mother walked ahead of us, stiff, refusing help. My father lingered near me. "She didn't mean what she said in that letter," he murmured. I didn't answer. "She's scared," he added. "So was I said, "for years." He flinched. Back at the house, I reviewed discharge instructions again, confirmed pharmacy details, scheduled a follow-up appointment. Scott hovered uselessly. Paige disappeared upstairs. When everything was finally settled, my mother turned to me. "You've made your point," she said. "Now you can step away." I met her eyes. "That's not how it works." She frowned. "Excuse me." "You can't revoke authority informally," I said. "And you can't demand involvement only when it suits you." Her jaw tightened. "We'll speak to our lawyer." "Yes," I said calmly. "You should." That night, I stayed in a hotel instead of the house. I needed distance. At midnight, my phone buzzed. An email from the hospital billing department. Subject clarification needed. They had flagged an insurance discrepancy, a coverage gap during a prior incident years ago. One I remembered clearly. My grandmother's fall. The near lawsuit. I opened the attachment. A claim denial. Because documentation had been altered after submission. My stomach dropped. I forwarded it to Rachel immediately. She called me within minutes. "This isn't small," she said. "If records were changed, even unintentionally, liability attaches." To whom I asked. "To whoever was responsible at the time," she replied. I closed my eyes. That responsibility had been mine, but only because my parents had signed it over, and because I had protected them. Rachel continued, "If this comes under review, now your parents' recent actions matter." "Because they tried to revoke authority," I asked. "Yes," she said. "They're claiming you acted independently. That's a problem." I sat on the edge of the bed, pulse steady, mind sharp. "They're trying to rewrite the past," I said. "And the paper trail won't let them," Rachel replied. I slept badly. The next morning, I received another email, this one from an insurance compliance auditor. They were opening a review, triggered by the hospital admission, triggered by questions, triggered by my parents' attempt to assert control without documentation. I dressed slowly, carefully. This was no longer a family argument. It was a process, and processes don't care about intentions. They care about records. The audit letter arrived 3 days later by certified mail. Not to my parents, to me. I signed for it in the lobby of my building and carried it upstairs without opening it, my movements precise, measured. I had lived inside audits for most of my professional life. I knew the smell of them, the tone, the quiet inevitability. Inside my apartment, I placed the envelope on the table and made coffee first. I didn't rush. When I finally opened it, my instincts were confirmed. Review of medical and estate-related authority delegations spanning the previous 8 years. Scope financial, medical, and liability actions. Request for documentation. Deadlines. Consequences. I forwarded everything to Rachel. Her response was immediate. "They did this to themselves," she said. "They'll blame me," I replied. "They already tried," she said. "That's what triggered scrutiny." I sat down and opened my files. Everything was there. Every consent form. Every email. Every signature. Every decision time-stamped and traceable. I had never hidden anything. I had never acted outside my mandate, but I had shielded them, quietly corrected mistakes, paid penalties, settled disputes early. I stopped doing that. That was the difference. My parents called that afternoon, both of them on speaker. "This has gone too far," my mother said. "Now outsiders are involved." "Yes," I replied. "That's what happens when internal systems fail." "We never asked you to handle everything," she said. "You signed documents asking me to," I said. Silence. My father spoke. "What do they want?" "Transparency," I said, "and accountability." "We can fix this," my mother insisted. "You can tell them you acted alone." I laughed softly, once. "No," I said. "I won't lie." "You destroy us," she hissed. "I won't protect you at my own expense," I replied. The line went dead. Over the next week, the auditors worked efficiently. They asked for files. I sent them. They requested clarification. I provided it. They contacted my parents. That did not go well. Scott called me late one night, voice shaking. "They're asking about old expenses," he said. "Trips, medical reimbursements, stuff Mom said was fine." "Was it documented?" I asked. "No," he whispered. I closed my eyes. "They're talking about penalties," he said, "about negligence." "I warned you," I replied quietly. Paige sent me a message the next morning. "Mom says you're punishing her." I didn't respond. By the end of the second week, the findings were clear. No criminal wrongdoing, but extensive mismanagement. And one critical conclusion: I had acted appropriately. They had not. The affidavit that empowered me also bound them. They could not claim ignorance. They could not claim isolation. They had been present. They had benefited. And now they were responsible. Rachel called me on a Friday afternoon. "They're being fined," she said, "and required to restructure care management under external oversight." I exhaled slowly. "And me?" I asked. "You're cleared," she said, "fully." I hung up and stood by the window watching the city move. I felt no triumph, no joy, only relief. They had tried to push me out. Instead, they had dragged the truth into the light, and it was heavier than any of us expected. The fine didn't ruin them. The oversight did. Money my parents could rationalize. They had always believed money problems were temporary, external, someone else's fault. But oversight meant eyes, schedules, reports, people who asked questions and expected answers that matched the paperwork. The first compliance officer arrived on a Monday morning. Her name was Denise, mid-40s, calm voice, sensible shoes. She spoke gently, but she didn't smile when my mother tried to charm her. I wasn't there in person. I joined by video at Denise's request. Ms. Hale, Denise said, nodding at my screen. Thank you for your cooperation throughout this process. My mother stiffened. You don't need her, Eleanor snapped. She's the reason we're in this mess. Denise turned slowly toward her. Mrs. Hale, the documentation shows otherwise. Silence. Denise explained the new structure. Monthly reviews. Independent care coordinator. Financial reporting requirements. No discretionary withdrawals without approval. My father stared at the table. This is humiliating, my mother said. No, Denise replied evenly. It's accountability. When the call ended, Scott texted me immediately. She's furious. She says you set this up. I set my phone down without responding. That evening, my father called. His voice sounded older than it ever had. She doesn't know how to live without control, he said. That's not my responsibility, I replied. I know, he said quietly. I just needed to say it out loud. After we hung up, I sat alone in my living room and felt something unfamiliar. Grief. Not for what I'd lost. For what had never existed. A family that could hold truth without punishment. A mother who could hear no without declaring war. A father who could stand up before everything collapsed. That version of my life was gone. The next morning, Denise emailed me. Subject clarification on scope of authority. They wanted to formally transfer certain responsibilities back to my parents under supervision. Rachel reviewed it. You don't have to accept, she said, and I wouldn't. Why, I asked. Because they're still looking for a way to make this your fault, she replied. Let the system hold them. I declined the transfer. My mother did not take that well. She showed up at my apartment unannounced 2 days later. I didn't open the door. Meredith? She shouted through the hallway. You think you've won? I leaned against the door, heart steady. I think this is the outcome of your choices, I said. You turned everyone against me, she screamed. No, I replied. You did that yourself. Her voice dropped suddenly, dangerous calm. You won't always be alone, she said. People leave. I know, I said. That's why I chose myself. She stood there for a long time before leaving. That night I booked a vacation. Not a family visit, not a work trip. Just time away, because the truth had finally settled. I wasn't escaping. I was moving forward. I took the trip in early spring. A quiet coastal town in Oregon still half asleep after winter. Cold mornings, long walks, the sound of waves breaking without urgency. For the first few days, I did nothing. I slept, I read, I let my thoughts come and go without chasing them. On the fourth morning, my phone buzzed. Paige. I hesitated, then answered. I moved out, she said without preamble. I sat up. For Mom's, she clarified. I couldn't breathe there anymore. I waited. She blames you, Paige continued. For everything, but I don't. That was new. She keeps saying you abandoned us, Paige said. But I don't think that's true. I looked out at the ocean. What do you think is true? I asked. Paige inhaled shakily. I think you stopped sacrificing yourself. I closed my eyes. I'm scared, she admitted, but I'm also relieved. That makes sense, I said. She was quiet for a moment. I don't want to repeat her. I understood what she meant. Neither did I. When I returned home, my apartment felt different. Not emptier, quieter, settled. Rachel called with a final update. The oversight period is set, she said. They'll be monitored for at least a year. After that, it depends on compliance. And me, I asked. You're done, she replied. Legally, completely. I thanked her and ended the call. That evening, my father emailed me. No excuses, no requests. Just facts. Your mother is struggling. Therapy is not going well. I am learning how much we depended on you. I'm sorry I didn't protect you. I read it twice. I didn't reply. Not because it wasn't sincere, but because sincerity doesn't erase impact. Weeks passed. The urgency faded. Life filled the space where chaos had been. One afternoon, sitting at my desk, I realized something quietly profound. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger requires connection. I had acceptance, and acceptance felt lighter than anything I had carried before. The story wasn't over, but the power had moved, and this time it wasn't sitting on my shoulders. The call came on a Thursday evening just as I was chopping onions for dinner. I almost didn't answer. The number was unfamiliar, but something in me hesitated the way it does when the past clears its throat. This is Meredith Hale, I said. Ms. Hale, a man replied, his voice measured professional. My name is Thomas Keller. I'm the appointed guardian ad litem reviewing your mother's compliance case. I set the knife down. Yes, I said, how can I help? There was a pause, brief but weighted. I'm calling because we've identified a concern, he said, and given your prior role, we felt it appropriate to inform you directly. I leaned against the counter. Go on. Your mother has been attempting to circumvent the oversight structure, he said, specifically by pressuring third parties to make discretionary decisions on her behalf. I closed my eyes. How, I asked. She's been contacting distant relatives, church members, even former neighbors, he said, asking them to sign informal affidavits claiming she is being unfairly controlled. None of it holds legal weight, but it demonstrates resistance. That sounds like her, I said quietly. There's more, he continued. She's also claimed that you manipulated her into signing the original affidavit years ago. That one stung even though I'd expected it. What are the implications, I asked. Given the documentation, none for you, he said. But for her, it suggests a pattern. If this continues, the oversight may extend or intensify. I thanked him and ended the call. I stood in my kitchen for a long time after that, listening to the simmer of the pot on the stove. I felt tired. Not physically, existentially. For years, every chapter of my life had been written in response to my mother's behavior. Her moods, her needs, her distortions of reality. Even now, when I had stepped away, she was still trying to pull me back into the narrative. As villain, as manipulator, as cause. I realized then that distance wasn't enough. I needed closure. Not with her, with myself. The next morning, I requested a formal withdrawal, not from the oversight, from the family. Legally, emotionally, practically. Rachel drafted the documents with care. Voluntary resignation from all remaining roles. No advisory capacity. No emergency contact. No informal involvement. A clean line. This doesn't mean you don't care, Rachel said gently. It means you're done being the buffer. I signed. As the pen left the page, something inside me loosened. That afternoon, I sent a single email to my parents. Short, neutral, final. I am stepping away from all family-related responsibilities, effective immediately. This is not punitive. It is necessary. Please direct all future matters to the appointed professionals. I did not explain. I did not justify. I did not soften it. Paige called me later that night. She's spiraling, she said. Mom, she says you've abandoned her. I closed my eyes. Paige, I said gently. She felt abandoned the moment she lost control. That's not the same thing. Paige was quiet. I don't want to choose sides, she whispered. You don't have to, I said. Just don't choose denial. When we hung up, I went to bed early. I slept deeply. No dreams. Spring arrived slowly that year, like it wasn't sure it was welcome. Trees budded. Sidewalk cafes reopened. Light stayed longer in the evenings. And for the first time in my adult life, my nervous system began to trust the quiet. Work flourished without friction. I took on a new region. Traveled when I wanted. Declined when I didn't. I wasn't proving anything anymore. I was choosing. One afternoon, while sorting through old files on my laptop, I found a voice memo dated 5 years back, the day after my grandmother's funeral. I pressed play. Her voice filled the room, thin but steady. Meredith, she said, if you're listening to this, it means you're still trying to hold everyone together. Please don't. Love doesn't require disappearance. My throat tightened. She had known. I sat there for a long time, letting the words land. A week later, I received a letter from the Oversight Office. My mother's non-compliance had resulted in extended supervision. My father had accepted it quietly. Paige had formally declined any involvement. The system was holding. I was free. One evening, walking home from dinner with friends, I caught my reflection in a shop window. I looked different. Not happier in a loud way. Calmer, rooted, real. I thought about the question that had haunted me for years. Who am I if I'm not needed? The answer came easily now. I am someone who chooses herself. I am someone who tells the truth without needing to be believed. I am someone who understands that love is not a transaction. I didn't win a war. I ended one. And in doing so, I finally stepped into a life that belonged to me. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been the responsible one, blamed for holding boundaries, share your thoughts in the comments. Like the video if it spoke to you. Subscribe for more real stories about family, truth, and reclaiming yourself. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away. And sometimes that's where life finally begins. I thought walking away would be the hardest part. I was wrong. The hardest part was what came after, when nothing dramatic happened at all. No explosions, no final confrontation, no moment where my mother suddenly understood everything and apologized. Life simply continued. And that was unsettling. Weeks passed, then months. The Oversight Office sent routine updates. Dry language, compliance checklists, progress reports. My parents were following instructions just well enough to avoid escalation. Not thriving, not collapsing, existing inside limits they hadn't chosen. My father adjusted in small, almost invisible ways. He learned how to schedule appointments himself. He asked questions instead of deferring. He stopped pretending confusion was harmless. Paige changed more dramatically. She found a better job, moved again, started therapy on her own terms. She didn't talk about my mother much anymore. When she did, it was with distance, not fear. I didn't realize how loud her voice was in my head until it wasn't there anymore, she told me one afternoon over coffee. I nodded. I understood that too well. My mother, however, did not adapt quietly. She wrote letters. Not emails, letters, long looping handwriting, emotional, contradictory. Some accused me of cruelty. Some begged for reconciliation. Some rewrote history entirely. I read the first two. I didn't read the rest. Not because I was afraid, because I didn't need to. That realization came slowly then all at once. I didn't owe her comprehension. I owed myself peace. One evening, while reorganizing my apartment, I found a box of old notebooks. Journals from my 20s, pages filled with lists, plans, reminders, other people's needs meticulously cataloged. I flipped through them and felt a strange tenderness. I had been trying so hard to be good. Not good enough. Just good. Responsible, available, reasonable. I sat on the floor and let myself grieve that version of me. Not because she was weak, because she deserved better. A month later, Rachel called with a final update. "The oversight period is officially extended," she said. "Your mother contested again. It didn't go anywhere." "How's my father?" I asked. "Exhausted," she replied, "but compliant." "And me?" I asked, even though I already knew. "You're completely removed," she said. "There is no legal, medical, or financial connection remaining." I thanked her and hung up. That night I went for a long walk. The city felt different now. Less sharp, less demanding. I noticed things I used to miss. Window lights, conversations drifting from cafes, the sound of my own footsteps steady and unhurried. I realized something quietly profound. I had spent years preparing for disaster, but no one ever taught me how to live without it. This was the unfamiliar terrain, not chaos, stability, and it required a different kind of courage. The anniversary came without warning. 1 year since the memorial service, 1 year since the lunch that changed everything. I didn't mark it on my calendar. I didn't need to. My body remembered. That morning I woke earlier than usual. Sunlight spilled across the floor. The air felt lighter, almost tentative, like it was checking in. I made coffee and sat by the window watching the city wake up. I thought about my grandmother, about the way she used to observe quietly, the way she rarely intervened but never missed anything. She had seen what I couldn't then. That love without boundaries turns into obligation. That competence attracts dependency. That families don't always reward the one who holds everything together. Sometimes they punish her for it. I whispered thank you into the quiet room. Not because she saved me, because she trusted me to save myself. Later that day, I received a message from Paige. "Mom asked about you," she wrote. "I didn't give her details." I smiled faintly. "Thank you," I replied. That was enough. In the afternoon, I went to a bookstore, bought a novel, sat in a cafe and read without checking my phone. No urgency tugged at my attention. No one needed anything from me. For the first time in my life, that didn't feel empty. It felt earned. I thought about the old belief that had governed so much of my life. That being needed meant being loved. I understood now how dangerous that idea was. Being needed can trap you. Being chosen sets you free. That evening as I walked home, the sky burned orange and pink over the buildings. I stopped on the sidewalk and just stood there breathing it in. I wasn't waiting for the next crisis. I wasn't bracing for impact. I was present. And that was new. When I unlocked my door and stepped inside, the apartment felt like it truly belonged to me. Not a resting place between emergencies, not a command center, and a home. I poured a glass of water and raised it just slightly to no one in particular. To the woman who learned too late and still made it out. To the truth that hurt before it healed. To the life that begins when you stop explaining yourself. If this story found you, if you recognized yourself in the quiet responsibility, the unspoken pressure, the guilt that comes with being capable, know this. You are not selfish for stepping back. You are not cruel for choosing peace. You are not wrong for refusing to disappear. Sometimes the most powerful revenge is not destruction. It's release. If this story resonated with you, share your thoughts in the comments. Like the video if it spoke to your experience. Subscribe for more stories about truth boundaries and reclaiming yourself. Because the strongest people are often the ones who finally stop holding everyone else up and choose to stand on their own.